You're watching The Bat. Welcome to this month's Salute to Service, and with me today I have U.S. Army veteran Annette Mullins. How you doing, Annette?
Really good. How are you doing?
Good. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, U.S. Army Reserve, right?
Reserve, yes.
Okay, and where'd you grow up at?
Grew up in Grafton.
Grafton,
right
Ohio?
around the corner here, and then I moved to Medina when I married my husband. He's also a veteran.
Okay, all right. He's a paratrooper, right?
He was airborne. He was a combat engineer.
All right, but we're not here to talk about
No.
him. So, how did you get into the Army?
I needed money for college.
Okay.
No trust fund here, so I signed up for the biggest bonus, and the Army Reserves had that at the time.
Okay, so what did you do in the Army? Well, first of all, what year did you go in?
I signed up in 2000, and I got out in 2008.
So right before 9/11.
Yeah.
So you sign up and you're going to college and everything else, and then all of a sudden, boom, 9/11
I'm
hits.
standing in the cafeteria as the towers were hit, watching it on
Wow.
TV.
So what's going through your head then as an Army Reservist? Because the Army Reservists and National Guard were pretty much left alone.
At
up until that
first,
point, yeah.
but then everything changed at our unit.
Okay.
All of a sudden we start getting equipment. All of a sudden we got the newest uniforms. We got, all kinds of stuff that before we weren't a high priority. So all of a sudden we start going to training and having more training. So we knew the climate changed.
Right.
We knew something was going on.
Yeah, the whole world kind of changed
Yeah.
on that day. Where'd you wind up going to basic at?
Fort Jackson.
And AIT down there also?
I went to Fort Lewis in Missouri for AIT.
Is that where the transportation corps is?
Yes.
All right. So how'd you like that?
I liked Fort Jackson a lot, and everybody says it is the relaxed one. I didn't have that experience there.
Did you went through an all-female basic
Nope,
training?
we were co-ed.
Co-ed, okay.
We
So-
lived separately, but we trained together.
So how was that in 2000?
It was fine. It was fine. We had both male and female drill sergeants. They were just as mean to everybody, you know.
Okay.
So it was fine. I really fit into basic training like a round peg. It was fun for me. I liked all the physical activity. I did not care for land nav. They can have that.
I always say that, if you can just ignore everybody yelling at you, basic training was a lot of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
it was physical. You were doing stuff that you normally wouldn't do. And, they fed you, you slept. I mean, not as much sleep as you wanted sometimes, but.
It's probably the first time I had a normal sleep schedule because
Okay.
you went to bed at the same time every day and you worked out at the same time. So I was I didn't have an issue with it. And I thought the drill sergeants were really funny. They're screaming at you, but they're doing their jokes and they're making fun of you and everything, and you try not to laugh. So I thought they were funny. And if you behave yourself and you're not doing anything that's outlandish, they're going to leave you alone.
Yeah. I mean, they pretty much, it seems like there's always one or two person in the platoon that they focus on. And when you look at the person, you kind of know why.
And you wonder, why did they sign up? Like, why
Yeah.
did you come here if you have a problem with authority, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sometimes they turn out as some of the best soldiers.
Yeah.
So off to Missouri for truck driving school. Did you ever drive a truck or anything? What was the biggest thing you drove before that?
Just a regular, F-250 Ford truck. My
Okay.
dad's truck. That's it. So.
And now you're getting ready to drive semis
Yeah.
and stuff.
Well, they didn't have any actual like in my unit, we drove 915s,
Okay.
semi trucks. But at training at AIT, they had it's like a flat face truck. They didn't have us drive the actual vehicles, and they explained it as every unit has a different kind of vehicle.
Right.
So you train at this basic one, and then you'll get trained on your vehicle when you fall on your unit.
So how hard was AIT?
I didn't think it was difficult. There was more, written tests and things like that. You had to actually study and things like
Safety
that.
stuff,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah.
So it was different. It was less physical things, which I enjoyed the physical side of it. So it was more of a nuisance for me.
So basic AIT, and then you come back home and you're going to college.
Yes.
And doing your reserve drill thing. Where was your unit at?
In Akron,
Akron,
762nd.
All right. So 9/11 hits, and obviously you said the world changed. So how long before you got activated?
We were called up January 18th, 2003.
So right before the invasion of Iraq, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're called up, did you know you were going to Iraq, or?
No, everything was hush-hush. The
Okay.
hints that they gave us, everything said Turkey. But then when we landed in Kuwait, they're like, oh no, we're going to Iraq. You know, but everybody lands in Kuwait.
You got to get to Turkey through
Yeah.
Iraq if you're
When
in Kuwait.
they, remember we flew to Italy and then they flew us to the Middle East. When we were leaving Italy, that's when the commander said, this is where we're going. And that's when we actually knew. There were rumblings about Turkey though.
And what day was that? Do you remember the date?
The day we flew in, let's see, we were boots on ground in June. So
In Kuwait.
in Kuwait in June.
So by then the war had already kind of started and everything.
I was glad the chemical stuff was finished.
Yeah. So so when you land in Kuwait, I mean, well, once you get told, I mean, obviously, you know, you're activated and you kind of think maybe where you're going, but once you're actually told, hey, we're going to Iraq, and you know there's a war going on over there, what's a young woman thinking?
How fast can I get this done and go home? You know, I had just gotten engaged. I had big plans. You know, it was a big interruption in my life, so I was ready to get back to my real life.
Yeah. So so how did you, you know, I mean, how do you think you changed because of that? I mean, was there any, you know, I mean, focus on family? You know, I want to focus on my career in the military for the next 6 months and then go home. I mean, how do you think that affected you? I mean,
I was very focused. I wanted to get promoted to E5, you know, and there was in our unit, if you got promoted in country, it was supposed to be harder than getting promoted stateside because it was based off of your behavior and your actions in real time.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a board or paperwork, that kind of thing. And I had prepared, while we were at Fort Knox, I prepared my entire promotion packet, so I had it ready to go. All I had to do was change the dates and hand it in when it was time. So the first 6 months or so, maybe 8 months, I was very focused on leading missions and doing everything I could to get more points and take on more responsibilities so I could be promoted. I really wanted to be promoted to E5. That was my highest ambition. I knew that after that I was going to get out. I knew I
Right.
wasn't going to re-up or retire.
Yeah. Everybody wants to be a buck sergeant, right?
Yeah.
So so when you get over there, you know, and obviously you land in Kuwait, I guess, you know you're going to Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
you're driving a truck, convoys, things like that. What did you do over there?
We drove 915 big semi trucks with flatbed trailers, and we would, back then Doha was the port, so we would pick up our loads at Doha and then, or Arif John, and then take them all over Iraq. So north, south, east, west, we were all over the place.
Did you have security going up with you, or was it just you guys pulling
It was
out
just
security?
us. We were our own security. Eventually, by the end of the deployment, our company had designed a gun truck where they reconfigured one of the trailers with the Mark 19.
Okay.
So we had our own security that we put, and it depended where your mission went. If you went to Cedar, which was the most southern point, it was a base in southern Iraq. Cedar, that was kind of a low priority mission. You didn't need any support there.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're going to Baghdad or Mosul, then the gun truck went with you.
Okay.
Anytime we had a sensitive load like artillery or ammo or anything, a lot of times we didn't know what was in the connexes because we were just put the connex on our flatbed. But what gave us an inkling was all of a sudden the closer we got to Baghdad, the air support would show up.
Oh.
So then you knew, okay, I have a sensitive load today, or we have a sensitive convoy today.
Yeah, so if you're moving a howitzer in there or something like that.
We don't
yeah.
know what's in there, but it's something important if the air support shows up all of a sudden
Yeah.
and they're escorting us through Baghdad.
So how was it, you know, as a woman over there, you know, obviously you're the minority, around a bunch of guys in the Army, but how was it being a woman in country where women are treated so much differently?
I was an oddity to them. You know, the local men would just stare. They would get probably like maybe this close, 6 feet or so, and they would openly gawk at me, stare at me, that kind of thing. It made my male partner, my driving partner, very uncomfortable to where he would be uncomfortable with how hard they were staring at me.
Yeah.
So he would ask me to switch out with him,
Right.
and then they would move over there and stare at me over here, you know. So sometimes you get some mean looks. I was surprised that I had a worse reception with the Iraqi women. You know, that was a surprise to me. I was not expecting to have such venom directed towards me from them. And
Do you think it's jealousy out of maybe what you can do and they can't, or do you think it's resentment that, I don't know, that you're stepping on what they feel women should be in because you're not that? I mean,
I think I represented everything that they couldn't be, that they weren't allowed to have, and that everything that was wrong in the world. To me, to them, I was the epitome of what's wrong in the world.
Yeah.
Women shouldn't be doing those kind of things.
Yeah.
You know, and it was always the older generation, you know.
So you think some of the younger ones were kind of like looked at you and said, wow, you know, why can't I do that, or why can't I?
I don't know, because we never talked to them.
Yeah.
And there's a language barrier, and they would stand off from me. They would talk to the men, but they wouldn't talk to me.
Right.
Which I was fine with. I wasn't there to make friends.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And they, for the most part, kept their distance, and they just would stare. The little girls, when they would come begging, they had more of like a curious vibe.
Yeah.
I was an oddity, you know. Whereas, and some of the men, that's the vibe I got from them. I didn't necessarily feel fear for my safety. It was more they couldn't figure me out, kind of thing.
It's, you know, I remember Iraq and Afghanistan, you know, men and women were two separate sects, but the one thing that always kind of reminded me of home was the kids, because it seems like no matter where you go in the world, kids are kids, you know, when they're still young, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. I mean, they're no different than my kids. They just laugh and want to have fun and
very curious. They ask you for stuff. They want candy. They want food. They want water. That kind of thing.
So the kids were just like kids anywhere to me,
Yeah.
you know. But there's a difference in the grown-ups.
If they had a question about me or they wanted to know something about me, they would ask my male partner.
Oh, so they really wouldn't talk to you?
They wouldn't talk to me. They would go to him and they
Yeah.
would stare at me, and I could tell that they were asking questions about me. And then he would come over and say, "Hey, they want to know this. They want to know that." And they always assumed that we were married. You know, that kind of thing.
Oh, because you're with each other. Yeah, of course,
that's you know. And
So,
then when I was with my squad leader, he was much older than me. They thought he was my dad.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
he was so offended by it.
So, I mean, any major events? I mean, you're doing these convoys. Obviously, a lot of interaction with people. You're stopping, I'm sure. But any major events over there, IEDs or anything that you want to talk about? I mean, anything happen?
Probably the biggest thing that we had was the Battle of Biop. That was in 2004 during Easter Sunday. There's a video on YouTube about it that explains it top to bottom. But we were on mission, and we were traveling back south from going all the way north, and we were at Biop. We stopped overnight, and on Easter they attacked coming over the wall that was right by where we were set up. So we ended up being stuck there for 18 days. We were
So was it
under
closer
siege.
to your end of tour or in the beginning? Was it?
Closer to the end,
Okay.
the second half.
So did it change your heightened awareness after that, or were you always kind of, you know?
It was definitely unsettling to be stuck there for 17 days. They had blown all the bridges, so we were like, well, are we ever going to get out of
So
here?
you're stuck in Biop?
Yeah, we're stuck in Biop.
Okay.
The engineers came in and put bridges down. That event, you know, 18 days later, we were able to leave.
Get out.
But it definitely changed the temperature of the situation, because they were actually coming over the wall right where we were. And they were targeting us because they knew we were there.
Right.
They were
So it was a
targeting the
planned
trucking
event. It was
units.
probably
Oh yeah.
planned,
Oh yeah.
I mean, once you know, so obviously, you know, you have different levels, you know, humans of heightened awareness, and you know, so when you go out on those convoys and you come back and you're behind the wall again, it's kind of a breather, isn't it?
It was until that situation. You know, that situation.
You didn't feel quite as safe anymore.
No, because like, okay, do you go to sleep? They're
Yeah.
coming over the wall. Are they going to come at night?
Yeah.
We don't know. So it changed everything. It was like, okay, we weren't as comfortable because we had been there for months at that point. But I wasn't as comfortable, and we had to sleep in our flak vests. You slept with your weapon underneath the trailers.
Yeah.
Before, you could be a little more relaxed. You know, you down to your t-shirt, whatever. But I was like, okay, we have to sleep with all our gear on.
Yeah, you were ready for that. So, I mean, obviously you build friendships in the military. Any long-lasting friendships, and do you think you would have built those same friendships if you would have just been here at home in the reserves and not deployed?
I have very, very good friendships, and they definitely strengthened being deployed together. I was 23 when I was deployed, and I hung out a lot with the older guys. They were married, they had kids that were teenagers, that kind of, that age group. And I would not have socialized with them at the unit. I had been there for a couple years, and I had just seen them in passing. And after being on the road with them, living with them, knowing them, two of them in particular, Staff Sergeant Van Meter, Staff Sergeant Holk, they became my mentors for when I was getting promoted. So I really relied on them for advice and companionship, and to this day we're still friends.
So, any advice out there for, like, I mean, obviously you're a woman, and the military's changed a lot since
Yes.
you've been in, since I've been in. It's 20 years, 20 some years. And a woman in 2001, 2002 in the military was different than a woman in the military in 1990 or 1980,
Yeah.
and it's different than a woman in today's military, I'm sure. So, what advice would you have to a young girl that's thinking about joining the military, and what would you tell her about, should I join or should I not join? Because we all hear a lot of horror stories about being a woman in the military, and yet we still hear about all these women that love their time in the military and had great experiences with it and wouldn't do it any different. So, coming from the horse's mouth, as they say.
I think if it's something that you're passionate about, or that you'll use as a tool in your life, to definitely go forward with it. I would make sure they have an understanding of what they're walking into. I think it's better now than it was, but it's still a boys' club. Mm-hmm. It's still a different set of rules. And after you prove yourself that you're focused and what you're there for, I know with my experience, after 6 months of being there, and they seen that I was serious and I knew my job and I could do everything that they could, they treated me like one of the guys, and I just blended in. But I was aware of some of the other women didn't have that experience. They went a different route. So it depends. If you're going there for career reasons or for money for college, things like that, that's what you need to stay focused on.
Right.
It's not a dating game. It's not there for, which nowadays you have social media and everything else, so it's a totally different game.
Yeah.
But if that's what you want to do, then go for it. But if it's not something that you're going to commit your life to, that could have everlasting changes on you, I wouldn't go for it. Nowadays, you're going to be deployed any part of the world.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, whether you're guard or reserves or active,
it doesn't matter. You're going to be deployed.
Yeah.
So, and as a driver, we drove right through the front lines. We went Mosul down to Doha. Yeah. So there is no separation. You're going to be exposed to everything, unless you choose something that is stateside, like an office position or something like that. So if you understand what you're going into, then 100%, it's what you make it. It could be a positive situation.
Yeah, I always, and even going back and today, it was like, well, women aren't forward deployed with the combat troops, and I'm kind of like, no, they're pretty much everywhere. I mean, they may not be an infantry person, but they're pretty much walking with the infantry, or you got camera crewmen, people out there, truck drivers. I mean, they're
medics.
Yeah, I mean,
medics are assigned to Ranger units.
They are everywhere. I mean, so, and that's even changed more now to where, like you said, back in the day, they wouldn't assign a female medic unit to her, but now they're assigned there, and I think it's great. I mean, obviously, generations move forward and things get better, so I think that's good. And I can remember after the war started, there was an issue where we were short medics, and we had an abundance of female medics, but we couldn't assign them to the infantry units. And we were just kind of like, well, we don't care what they are. We just need a medic, I mean, from the guy on the ground, he just wants somebody that can patch his wounds up. He doesn't care about all the,
And whenever I was a combat lifesaver when I was there, and during that situation at BIOP, when people would come over through the gate that were hit, I would treat them. Yeah. If it was a KBR person, if it was a male from another unit, he didn't care.
No.
I ran right up to him. No. It doesn't matter. No. I know, especially from, at the time I was 23, so my current generation, they didn't care. I didn't feel that, oh, you shouldn't be here. That was more from the older generation, right. So I acclimated fine, and whenever I needed to render care to somebody, I never had anybody turn me away. He didn't care. He'd drop his pants. There you go. Treat his wound. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I just want to live at that point.
He doesn't care, and at that point you're living together, so it's not that big of a deal.
I think as generations move forward, it gets better and better and better because times change. But I always just when people say that, well, and I actually had that said about a friend of mine who was a sergeant major. Somebody's like, well, you're a sergeant major. You're not out there fighting. And he's like, I pretty much led convoys, and I mean, that's the truth. I mean, there is no, front line with people sitting in offices 2 miles behind it anymore. It's fluid everywhere. And
our first sergeant led missions.
Yeah, I mean, people go everywhere.
It was more the big missions, not necessarily the smaller missions, but he was there with us.
Yeah, everybody.
And the lieutenants would switch off.
Yeah, and and the women are right up front in the, you know, in the heat of it too. And so, you know, my hat goes off to you, and it goes off to everybody out there that's today. Thank God that things seem to be calming down a little bit in the world, but I don't know. So what do you do? You know, I mean, you got out of the military, obviously, you made that choice, family and everything else. Was your husband still in the military at this
No,
point?
he was out. It was funny. We got out in the spring of 2000, and I didn't know him. We met in Brunswick.
Okay.
And I met him 4 days after I signed up. So he was out and I was in, and then we ended up being together. You know, he wasn't supposed to be the guy I marry.
Right.
So it turned out I couldn't get rid of him. So.
How can you resist a paratrooper though, right?
Yeah.
So when you do get out, you come back here. What's your plans? I mean, I mean, obviously, you know, you were already living here, but you know, you go to Iraq.
We were engaged.
It changes you a
Yeah.
little bit, right?
I was very focused when I came home because I knew we had another deployment pending.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a list. I needed to finish my college degree. I needed to get married, buy a house, and I wanted to get a puppy. So those were the 4 goals before I got deployed again. So we were supposed to get married in September 2003. They got put off to September 2004. I got home in June of 2004. So we had our wedding, we bought our house, got my puppy.
And what do you do today? I mean, how did the military get you to where you're at?
Well, I'm still a police dispatcher. I was that before I was deployed, during, and I still am. January will be 20 years that I've been doing that. As far as what the military gave me job-wise, I'm not doing that civilian side. But I did leadership skills, and, you know, they say don't sweat the small stuff. After coming off a deployment, everything feels like the small stuff.
Right.
So there's things that would just bother people that I'm like, why are you worrying about that? That's ridiculous. What do you... That's, you know, so I'm definitely more of a big picture person now. There's things that are just not worth your time anymore, especially when there's soldiers dying overseas, and you know, you see the living conditions of the local people. You're like, really? That's what you're worried about?
Was that your first time out of the U.S. when you went?
No, my parents are from Europe, so I've been to Poland before a few times.
So, well, and Poland's pretty nice place compared to Iraq.
Oh yeah, there's houses. Yeah.
So I mean, what's your perspective on coming back home though? I mean, it's, you know, I mean, the U.S. is.
I'm so grateful to be born here as a female. Seriously, I have rights. I can do what I want to do. It was just the entire deployment was a demonstration of how fortunate I am of where I was born. I'm so glad my parents immigrated to the U.S.
So what veterans groups do you belong to? I know you belong to a couple.
I'm president of Medina County Women of the Military.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because that's not your, you know, that's not your typical veterans organization. How do you get into that, or who belongs, or how did that come about?
Well, I've been with them for about 10 years now, and I was looking for just some other people in the area that to share experiences with. So I stumbled across this group when I was looking for something else, and I was like, oh, veterans, women's group, I'll try it.
Right.
You know, and they meet once a month at different restaurants in Medina and Brunswick, and it's more of a social group. We talk, we share stories, we're friends. And it's every branch. So it doesn't matter what generation you are or what branch you are, everybody's welcome.
Right.
You know, if it was active duty, reserve, if you were peacetime or wartime, everybody's welcome. It doesn't matter if you served a year or if you was a career, everybody's welcome. And it's just really nice to be able to relate to other women veterans that, especially when you come back stateside, and there's a certain experience that we have that other people don't really acknowledge or aren't really aware of. So it's nice to have other women veterans to be able to touch base with and really be understood.
So, I mean, do you have a lot of women that come into that, or are you?
Our group right now, we're probably between 40 and 50. And it's if you once a month we meet. It's if you want to come. There's no, like, you have to attend. So how do you become a member?
What do you get? What's the criteria to being a member?
Just be a female in whatever branch of service that you come in. We talk to you.
Do you have to be a Medina County resident?
You should be, but we let everybody in.
You let everybody in?
Anybody who wants to come hang out with us. We're fun.
Is there contact information for that?
You can email me.
Okay. I know I've been to a couple of your luncheons in the past, and it is a lovely group, and the stories are much different than mine, so I like that perspective. I always like finding out a little bit different things about the military. What other groups do you belong to?
American Legion for the last few years, and I started going to meetings
here in Brunswick, or
in Medina.
In Medina, okay. And how do you like that?
You know, it really reminds me of my time when I was deployed, and I would sit like with the old guys, you know, and they were drinking their coffee
Easy.
and commiserating, and and you know, those are my people. That's
Right.
my group, you know, my fellas.
So-
So I
so-
go and hang out with them.
Any activities in the county or in, you know, your community that you do, you know, on behalf of veterans? I mean, how do you do with that?
Well, we definitely try to, I do a monthly newsletter as the president, and anytime somebody needs information, it's very similar to what your office does, you know, but a lot of times women, they don't, myself included, I didn't reach out to your office until this last year when we had that
Right.
Women's Veterans Day event, you know.
Okay.
And I just thought it was very, you know, I'm done with it, and it's, you know, but in my newsletter, we put out, you know, somebody needs legal help. Here's some context for legal help. If you need medical, if you need a ride to your VA appointments, here, I put your guys' contact information in there. I tried to really connect people with what they need, because there's always something people, since we're friends, we know what's going on with each other. And it's like, oh, you got this going on, you have childcare issues, here's a resource for you,
Right.
just to help each other.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I mean, obviously the world's changing, the VA's changing, you know, with women, more women in the military. Obviously, we need more services for women when they get out of the military. And, you know, they started, I don't know if you've been down there, a whole new women's clinic down at the
I've
VA,
heard.
down at Wade Oval, and it's a whole building now. It used to be like a room in the back corner. Now it's a whole building. And so, I mean, it's the right thing to do. I mean, you're veterans. And you know, I always say this, you know, whether you're, you know, whatever gender you are or your preferences are, if you served your country, you should get the same thing that somebody else gets. You know, you should get the same services. So I think that's the right thing to do. I mean, we all raised our right hand and served honorably. So I ask everybody that comes on the show this, if you had the chances to do it all over again, would you?
Yes, I would. Hindsight's 2020. There's some things that I know not to believe the recruiter now. You know, everybody has their stories.
You're not going to be driving a nice mobile home.
No. Well, it's more about the education benefits.
Right, yeah.
There's a lot of stuff they don't tell you, a lot of red tape, and the way they sell it to you. You know, you have free medical for life. No, that's not true.
But you'd
But
sign your name on the dotted line and raise your right hand.
I would. There's a lot of in-between stuff that they don't tell you about.
Yeah.
So, but
Well,
I would do it again.
I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next month on Salute to Service. Thank you.
Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.